This is National Educational Television.
This is the story of a partnership in sound and of how composers have written for two very different instruments, the French horn and the piano. At times, blending their voices, at other times, contrasting them. Our concert today is a duet of French horn and piano. Vera Brodsky is going to play piano. My name is John Barrows, and I will play the French horn in our ensemble. The word ensemble is a French word for togetherness, and ensemble is the musical term for any sort of team of instruments. Let's see how our instruments sound together. That was one of the earliest examples of music written for the French horn and piano. It was a fanfare by the French composer Jean-Joseph Mouret. It was written around the year 1700. Up until this time, you see, the horn was used mostly as an instrument to signal people. For example, if the stagecoach were arriving at the inn with people and mail, someone always sounded the horn. The horn was often used on hunting parties to let them know whether they had found the deer or the fox. And its first appearance in the orchestra was to bring these outdoor effects into the orchestra. This was about the year, say 1620, about the time the Pilgrims landed here. And the hunting call was one of the first sounds to be brought into the orchestra. The piece we just played showed that outdoor quality. It was music to be performed between the acts of plays. Probably the play was about a forest scene. Now, next you will hear two more pieces by the same composer, and this first one is a minuet and then a second fanfare. Now listen for more hunting calls. Although the horn was used mainly in the orchestra, even as early as the year 1700, when these pieces by Mouret were written, a partnership in sound was starting, combining two very opposite instruments, the French horn and the piano.
And it's extremely interesting to consider what a great success this combination is when you know that the instruments are so terribly different. For instance, the piano is a percussion instrument. That means the sound is made by little hammers striking against the strings that are strung in the piano across a frame, sort of the shape of a harp, lying flat on its side. How would you like to come up and see how the sound is done on this?
Yes!
There are the strings, there's the frame, and here are the keys, and I do strike the keys like this, and that's how the sound is made. Well, now, if you go back to your seats, John Barrows has some things to tell you about the sound of the French horn.
Well, certainly the horn does not produce its tone by striking. Quite the contrary, you might compare it to singing, because the tone of the horn, like all wind instruments, is produced by the player's breath. So it's closely related to singing. I merely blow my breath into this mouthpiece, and that's how the sound of the horn is made. Would one of you like to try it? Why don't you come up here and have a try? Let's see. Well, how about you? Would you like to have a try? See what comes out. Wow, very good. Very good. Well, that's really quite an achievement, because players have to practice a long, long time to learn how to make their breath go into the horn and how to form their lips to produce that sound.
Well, that was grand. We have a very talented audience today, haven't we? Well, to get back to the story of our partnership, as time went on, more and more composers became very much interested in this combination, and they began to write more and more music for the horn and piano. And a very lovely example is this rondo by Franz Danzi that we're going to play. Now, he lived in Vienna about the same time Beethoven did, and he wrote this piece, shortly after our Revolutionary War, I should think. Now, it's a rondo. Does anybody here know what a rondo is?
No!
Well, a rondo is a piece in which the theme returns over and over and over again with other little themes in between. And you'll hear just what it's like when we play this rondo by Franz Danzi.
Perhaps you may have noticed that this piece of Danzi seems to bring the horn music into the home or into the recital hall, whereas the first pieces we played, written 100 years earlier, still have the horn as a forest instrument, a hunting horn. You see, at this point in history, we should really explain that a lot happened to the horn since we first came to know it. At the beginning of its development, the horn was able to play very simple melodies. It couldn't play all the notes. It was more like a bugle, you might say. And there were lots of in-between notes that the horn couldn't play. These notes the horn played were called harmonics, and they're like this. You see, there are a lot of in-between notes that get left out. The melodies written for the horn of that time were very simple and kind of bumpy in character. And I might compare those melodies, by the way, to the way you sometimes go up and down stairs. You know, 2 or 3 steps at a time, leaving out some. Well, you can get up and down, but it's not the smoothest way to do it. But the early horn players, you see, had no choice. But around the year 1830, they began experimenting with these things here, which we call valves. And gradually they enabled the player to fill in the spaces between those open notes, and so the horn soon became a completely chromatic instrument. By that I mean it could play up and down as smoothly as a violin or as a piano, like this. Now, I'd like to play a note without valves, and maybe you could come up here and help me. I'll hold an open note, and you push down one of the valves and see what happens. Now, we got an altogether different note, didn't we?
Yes.
Fine. Well, now, you can sit down if you wish. You see, that was one of the notes filling in the space between 2 open notes. Now, when composers found out about this, they were very happy, you may be sure, and they soon took advantage of it in their writing.
The piano also was advancing as time went on. Just as the horn was developing, so the piano was. It became a more powerful instrument. It got richer sounds. It became able to produce a singing tone. And so composers became still more interested, and they wrote pieces that brought the 2 instruments closer together. The piano could now sing more like a horn. And Alexander Scriabin, the Russian composer, wrote a very, very beautiful piece like this called Romance, and we're going to play it for you.
Well, as we come up to our own times, we find composers making even less distinction in their style of writing for the 2 instruments. Just as the piano was asked to sing in the piece you just heard, so the horn will be asked to play percussively in short, sharp notes in the next piece, a composition by the French composer Jean Francais. It's called a canon, not the kind that goes boom, but it's a musical canon, sort of a fun piece, a game of musical follow the leader. The instruments imitate each other, and each one has the same thing to say. Everyone knows Three Blind Mice, I hope. Yeah. All right, now you know someone starts with a tune, and then a second later, someone else plays the tune at a different time. The trick, of course, is for everyone to keep apart. You see, if you're together, you're wrong. Now, we'll show you the melody of the piece, first in the piano, and then together with the horn. I mean, not together. Now see how we just managed to stay apart.
All through musical history, the greatest composers have drawn from popular music and dance music for many of their very, very finest compositions. Beethoven and Mozart wrote wonderful works that were based on dance forms of their day. Now, today, in our times, the American composer Alec Wilder is one of the few who is really doing this. He makes wonderful music out of dance forms and jazz and all kinds of things like that. And the first piece that we want to play of his is not inspired by jazz, but it's a kind of a lonesome song. It has a quality that is very, very American and very beautiful, and it is called A Short Love Story.
Thank you. The next piece by Alec Wilder clearly has its sources in jazz. There's also a good bit of humor in the conversation between horn and piano. Listen while we play Dialogue with a Beat. Now, we have shown you how completely different we are. Perhaps it's just because of these differences that our instruments have become such a happy pair. It's really not so strange if you stop to think about it, because very often people who are very unlike make very good friends. You see, each one supplies the other with what he lacks, and they often work together in a wonderful way.
This is National Educational Television.